to From Code to Check-In, a Booking.com podcast. My name is Bram, and I'll be your host for this episode. I'm a machine learning scientist here at Booking. I've been here for 6.5 years. I've moved around a little bit. And actually, the place I started with was the fraud department, the security and fraud department. And that was a really exciting time. I think security and fraud, even though it might not be front and center, it should not be front and center, hopefully for the guest, but it is one of the most exciting areas to work for as a machine learning scientist. And with me today, I have Floriana, who way more recently worked in this department. And we are going to talk a little bit about what it means to be a machine learning scientist and working on fraud and security. So maybe you can briefly introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Floriana, senior machine learning scientist here at Booking.com, working in fraud prevention and security. I've been also working in different areas of fraud, and I've been moving across different departments. My expertise is in this area, where I work with machine learning models, classical machine learning models, or large language models, depending on the type of problem that we are solving. And I build these models to help protect both our partners and our guests. And today we are going to talk about fraud prevention and how we use technology and machine learning to help keep our customers all over the world safe.
Yeah, so that's a pretty exciting topic, but maybe for the audience that isn't listening, we can talk a little bit about what it means to talk about security and fraud within the Booking.com domain.
Yeah, so we are a platform for both guests and partners, and we have a list of products and services that we offer to everyone who is going to our platform. So one way to think about it is given the guest journey, in the moment that someone is making a booking, they are using a stolen credit card information to get a free stay. So at the moment of the payment, this is not their credit card information, is stolen from a different source. Another type of fraud that you don't really think about, but we know there are attempts that when someone is, the property for example, is making a booking with the purpose of boosting their visibility. So they want to get higher scores, they want to get more stays, etc. But this is not aligned with our values, so of course it's a fraud for us.
So things like fake reviews or something?
Yes, definitely, because we take pride in saying that these are real guest reviews and they are really showing the real experience of travelers. We also have other moments where a hacker got access to the property login details, so they compromised their account, and then they use this trusted channel of communication to reach out to our guests and try to take them outside of the platform to complete a payment, to give credit card details, etc. So you see, it's a broad spectrum. It happens at different parts of the platform, and each of them is different. They can affect the partner, they can affect the guest, they can affect our platform itself, the security, and also then the way we respond and we defend ourselves is depending on the type of attacks and their tactics.
So basically we need to trust no one so that the guests can trust everyone. If something like this happens, when do you realize that there is actually a problem that needs to be addressed?
Well, this type of fraud has been around for some time, but now they are using trusted communication channel to reach out to people because it's more trusted, right? And when we first started noticing this, we received some complaints. We have customer support, we have also partner support where both partners and guests can reach out with their complaints, and this was raised by customers. And also we have operational team, and we have experts that are fraud analysts. They are constantly looking into these cases.
So then we start sitting in a big room with a lot of screens, and some number starts blinking, going up, that there's more and more complaints coming in. Is that how this looks? Is that how we experience this?
Luckily, we are not at the point where, when we have a security system that is that our platform is quite secure, so when something like that happens, it's not at the scale that we need to do that. But yes, we do take it seriously, and then we start looking into it. It becomes a business priority, it becomes a topic for discussion, and that means that we start working on it.
So I can imagine that, let's say a customer comes and calls us and says, I'm getting these messages, we realized the hotelier was, or the partner was hacked. and messages were sent. We now want to prevent this from happening elsewhere. What's the first thing we can do? We don't want to wait for months to try and figure out how to resolve this. Is there something we can do more immediate?
Once we saw this happening, there's short-term solutions and long-term solutions, and you know that the long-term solutions also require a bit more time. So on the first step, we try to buy a bit of time. So the first response is really something pragmatic and fast. So we also try to contain that risk.
What would pragmatic mean here?
So, for example, they have an intention to get something out of the platform. Usually, it's financial gain. So, they're trying to get our customers to pay outside of the platform. And one way you can approach this quickly is like, I saw already this is something malicious. So let me introduce some rules so I can block. And of course, if you see that the problem is really big and you're getting an attack which is something that you want to prevent quickly, you can answer quickly by implementing those rules, because they are not expensive to be implemented and they can be implemented quickly.
Yeah, so if we realize a specific link is being used to request a payment, we could say, this link no more.
Exactly, that would be a fast response to it.
Yeah.
Gives us some time to then deep dive into the problem, to understand the complexity and think about gathering the data, cleaning the data, and coming up with a more automated solution like a machine learning approach, and automatically block this kind of scams.
So how do you prioritize when a problem becomes a machine learning worthy? Machine learning you don't generally do on the weekend and then on Monday it's live. How do you prioritize that work? How do you decide that something is worthy of a machine learning, like a full-fledged machine learning project?
Well, in fraud and security, we do take very seriously. And when something like that happens, we have priorities and resources that we start working on that. So we start working with a business need, and then make an exploratory data analysis. We have data scientists that can help us. Then we look into the data and we try to phrase that and convert it to a machine learning problem.
So in this case, because you mentioned this earlier to me outside of the recording, is that this is really a project that you worked on was about text, like phishing, and that required some more complex LLM, NLP type of approaches. What makes this type of fraud case so different from applying a normal LLM or NLP type of approach in machine learning? So
I mentioned earlier there are different types of fraud, and of course fraud has been around for a while. I already mentioned that, I believe, but previously, like in different types of fraud with transactional data, for example, the patterns there rely on numbers. So it's structural behavior. And in this case, when we started working on the problem, we started looking where the signal is leaving.
Yeah.
So the communication is coming through a trusted channel, which is, the hacked account from the property. And the difference is on the signal itself. That message contains what they want. The intent is in that message. And that is language and context.
Yeah, but we have many type of language and even intent detection and sentiment analysis is a pretty broad field of machine learning. What makes it different from this type of problem?
Yeah, it's different because here you're trying to really detect the malicious intent there, and there are different ways that they can approach our customers. For example, a subtle pressure or more polite way of reaching out. So they're always trying to get out something from the customer. This data, it doesn't contain a lot of malicious samples, so the data is really small, and luckily for us, and that's how we should keep it, is very small.
When you say small, you mean that there's not a lot of positive samples compared to all of the messages that go out that
Exactly.
are negative samples in this case.
Exactly. It happens rarely. But on the other hand, we are working with hackers and they are constantly changing their tactics. Fraud is still here because it evolves. It evolves with time. And while you are saying, oh, we have also sentiment analysis and maybe you want to use a language model to detect sentiment on reviews, that is less complex because you don't have someone putting negative emotions on purpose but they are happy. While we see with fraudsters and with hackers is that they really try to manipulate, they don't want to be detected, they really try to blend into a normal distribution so they can get what they want and not be detected, not be stopped.
Yeah, so it's not just detecting the sentiment, it's that they are actively trying to be a different sentiment, as you said.
Yeah, they change. So once something stops working, once we block something, then they start testing and trying different approaches, different strategies, and that's why it's then much more complex than the other
It's really an adversarial problem, right? You're really working with a opponent instead of trying to understand an environment.
That's true, but on the other hand, we also have the legitimate messages, like the messages that are, not malicious, and with the technology, with all the chatbots, etc. Also, that distribution changes over time. The travel patterns change over time, so there's a lot of changes over time, and you need to make sure that your model is capturing that distribution, and it's learning the newest patterns.
Yeah. So what type of information do you have available to learn something like this?
So in this case, we have a lot of, we collect a lot of data, like behavioral data, let's say, structured data, but we also have the text itself. And for this specific case, it's very important, and the signal relies on the text. So this is the kind of data that we are using.
So you have the text, and you have, I guess, the complaints. Is there anything more that you have, or is that it?
Yeah, in terms of labels, we also have the complaints, but we also have our fraud analysts that are constantly looking into this, and they are bringing forward cases like, this is a new pattern, this is something new that we see, and that is also very important because when you're working with a very imbalanced data set like this one, that we have very little phishing messages, it's important that the quality of that sample that you have, it's as clean as possible, because the model is going to learn from those patterns, from that text.
Yeah, so you have very little, yet it needs to be very clean. So that sounds like a careful balance. That to me sounds like something you would see everywhere in the fraud department, not just with phishing. When you take up a project like this, collaborate with others that are working on different fraud domains that you mentioned. And what type of learnings do you get from each other?
Of course, we collaborate with each other, and we have different teams that are focused on different types of fraud, and they are experts on that. And with this particular type of problems, with the evolution and with the progress of large language models, it becomes necessary to also collaborate with other experts across the company. And within fraud, we have researchers that are focusing more on the research part of the fraud landscape. But also we have across the company experts in Gen AI, so we can always reach out in terms of optimization, etc. So we put together the tooling, but also the expertise, and we can discuss when it's needed to come up with a solution and to do a better job.
Yeah, so that's actually one of the things that I enjoyed most, probably my time. So this was, I think, 4 or 5 years ago that I was in the fraud department. I think it's still around. We had these whiteboard sessions. We just got in with all of the scientists from all the different fraud teams, and we would be putting up problems that we were facing on the board, vote, and then without any preparation, just brainstorm, understand each other's problems. And that always brought some connections between teams to, find problems that were shared across different teams. And also, have you ever participated in these research hackathons that they do with the fraud team?
Yeah, definitely. Now we have a lot of support from the leadership and our managers to also work on such initiatives, and that is essential because it is evolving, and it's important that we go out there, we read about a paper, about a new tool, a new technology, and we test it out. So we have days where we have an idea, and then we are like, oh, I have these learning days, these focus days where I will focus on this specific research part, and I want to test it on my own project.
Yeah, so it's really to avoid just firefighting the whole year, but also being proactive and trying to understand different potential solutions before the fraudsters actually are able to figure it out, right?
Yes, and that's crucial in this domain, given how fast it evolves, how fast it changes. But not only that, we also have access to learning tools. We also have access, we can attend conferences only for learning purposes, and that's really great to have this kind of support. But in addition to that, we also have different collaborations. So there's the project, like related to a specific problem that you're working on, which in this case is detecting the phishing. Then we have exploring new tools and technologies. We have collaborations also with legal, because this is a very sensitive data that we are using, and we always have the privacy concerns, and it's important to keep that within the regulations that there are there. We have the legal support, the privacy support, and we have a lot of collaborations in different with different disciplines.
Yeah, so that is actually an interesting point you're making, because I'm assuming these types of jobs are not a one-man show or one-person show. What type of people are involved from your team's perspective?
Right, so I will cover a little bit the fraud and security department, because it's a large department, and that shows that the company is really investing and takes the security and the safety of the customers very seriously. And within fraud and security, we have different teams working and specializing in different topics. Within each team, there's usually a mix of roles. So there's machine learning scientists like myself and you. There's machine learning engineers, and after we have developed a model, they help with, let's say, productionization. We have software developers, software engineers, and then we also have at the center of expertise our fraud analysts, and we all come together with one purpose: keeping our customers safe.
So maybe for a project like the phishing project, then, because I mean, it's even for me, I think every team in booking is slightly different in how they operate. It's always difficult to figure out what all the roles are and how you go through such a project. Like, can you explain a little bit the particular approach you took? What this took of the team to get this done?
I think this is a very good example, because we started working on this like a few years back, not more than 2-3 years back. And when we first saw this type of phishing becoming a problem, we really started looking into where the signal is and what can we do to detect this. So we come together as a team, and then we explore a little bit what is available, the size of the data, what are we trying to detect, how big of a problem it is, can we fix it with a simple model, and which type of model. And then you decide that the best approach is large language models, because there's so much advancement in this field, and different I remember 3 years ago when we would use regex expressions to and hard code rules. Now the large language models offer much more, and they can learn from the context, etc. So then we are going with a large language model, but which one? And then you also think of the privacy of the customer. You want to make sure that you have a model that is hosted in-house, that you can train fast, and you have access to GPUs. So there are a lot of factors that you take into account. And also, this is messaging communication. So you want to make sure that your model runs in real time within milliseconds. So you have a very fast decision there when you have a message coming through.
Yeah, if the message is pay now or your reservation is canceled, then you don't want the model to tell you tomorrow that was not supposed to be there.
Exactly, exactly.
And also don't have messages wait for days to be received because we first need to do a check. So
yes,
that makes a lot of sense. So I'm guessing an API called OpenAI is off the table here then.
It's off the table, definitely. But we are a large company and we have our own solutions in-house. And whatever, we have a list of models that then they get approved, and then we use what is safe. Safety is first, and it's very important. Not only the model, but making sure that the privacy of our customers, that is also, it's very important.
The privacy needs to be preserved. No message leaves the server rack of booking. It needs to be fast. What type of model did you end up using?
Okay, so if you are a fraudster listening, close your ears. We use one of the Hugging Face models. I will not give away the exact name of the model also because we don't know who's listening to the podcast, so let's not give away too much information. Hugging Face has a lot of models that are great in performing in different topics, like you can use them for different purposes, so we use one of the Hugging Face models.
Yeah, and I guess something that is extremely important here more than anywhere else in the company is to basically not have this thing be stationary. So the model will probably be swapped frequently. The model needs to be retrained with all the new incoming samples, I'm assuming. How do you make sure that is something you can actually manage?
I think not only this type of problem, any fraud problems, you don't solve the fraud itself by just having a model, putting it to production and I'm done, I can go and do something else now. Fraud is evolving. The fact that you have a model is, I think, the beginning of it, and you have to constantly work on keeping the model efficient and working on improving, because data is changing, travel is changing, attackers adapt, they change their strategies, they want what they want back. So retraining is very important, and retraining, monitoring, and feedback loops. So once you have a model out there running, we also work on how can we retrain or automatically retrain. So we build systems that are safer and there's not a lot of humans in the loop, that we can automatically scale up.
That's actually funny that you're saying that. I remember one of the things that is always a pain in fraud, even more so than in the more commercial side of the business, is you build a model and then you release it, and then you go and celebrate and say, we have this success. We've saved this many travelers from getting messages that they were not supposed to. And if you do that and do nothing else, 2 months later, your model is doing nothing. You're basically saving no trips. So it's really that you cannot look at one moment in time and say this was a success or this was not. It's really about this constant making sure that you're ahead of the curve and ahead of this fraudster. So
yeah, and I want to add here that it's really important, those monitoring. So together with the model, having monitoring around it. So, and one simple, not expensive things to have is monitoring the detection. So how many phishing have you blocked? And that actually gives you an insight when the model is the efficiency of the model is starting to drop. Because once you go live, you are full on with a new model. Hopefully, the detections are higher because you have a new model. And then with time, you might see that the detections are decreasing. And that is giving you an insight that there are patterns that have changed and you need new data so the model can, again, pick up on the detections and be efficient over time.
So the absence of fraud is actually the presence of fraud.
Yes. It's a good way to put it, yes. Yeah. So you do need to monitor, retrain, and the feedback loops are as important as having the model in the first place.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work.
Well, keeps us off
the street. So maybe now we're getting a little bit towards the end of our chat. What is the thing that excites you most about working on these types of problems?
These types of problems are really challenging. The data pushes back, attackers evolve, they change strategies, they use technology, they have access, so it makes the work challenging, technically challenging, but also meaningful, because you know that a model you build, it's protecting customers, it's protecting the platform, and we want that people go and experience the world without having delays on, let's say, payments, on communication, etc. So knowing that I am contributing to make a little bit better their experience, then is something that for me feels very motivating and very rewarding.
I guess it's different than if you make the right recommendation, someone might have a slightly better trip. But if you do not do your work well, they will have a bad trip or bad experience overall.
Yeah, because everything that you do, so if you have a good model and you have a good, you are making sure that the customer is getting, let's say, the checking code on time, and he might or she might be outside of the property, and you did a good job, and they got the code so they can access the property, and the other stands true as well. So if you are not blocking this kind of malicious messages, you risk that the customer is taken out of the platform and they are a victim of the scam.
Yeah, it sounds like a really fun, exciting area to be working in, especially with machine learning. And as I can tell from what you're explaining to me is that it has applications for almost all of the recent developments in machine learning that we've been seeing. Large language models with all of the other things like deep learning and transformers. I can imagine that those all have places in this domain as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of... that's also the beauty of it, that you have so much opportunities there, and you can apply different methods and tools and technologies. Important is that you protect the customers, and I personally really like the trust that is given to us. They really trust us with our solutions and expertise, and then we also take our job very seriously to make sure that we do that part of it and we keep our customers safe.
Cool. So maybe we can talk also a little bit about what type of ways do you use to try and really get to this state of the art? Like, do you? We briefly mentioned the whiteboard sessions and the research sessions. Do you have ways how you stay current and make sure you can test these types of technologies before you have to run around and firefight problems that occur with these fraudsters?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely, if there's a problem from the business side and we see like we have to work and to really improve something, that comes as a priority because our customers are affected. But in addition to that, we also have time to test our ideas, to come up with solutions, and we are really supported in sense like, oh, I saw this new tool, I saw this new technology, I'd like to try it out and see how it performs. Of course, time box it, but that power, that trust is given to us, so we go out there and we test. Experimentation is part of our job.
So you read a paper, you think this sounds interesting, just tell to your product manager or manager, this Friday, I'm going to try this out. On Monday, I'll let you know if it's worth more investment. Is that how it goes?
Well, if it takes one day, definitely you'll get the support. But I do think that it will take more than one day. But yes, as long as it doesn't take too long and it doesn't distract you from your main business objectives.
Yeah, that is something I also remember from my time in fraud, is that as a machine learning scientist, you're one step away from the front line, essentially. You have the fraud analyst and the product managers that really try to understand, as things come in, respond now. But developing machine learning solutions takes some time. So we have this time to step back, take a look at the problem more pragmatic. Well, pragmatic is how you described solving it quickly, but I would say pragmatic is also the way you solve something more structurally in the long term.
There's something I'd like to add. So when something is happening and it's alarming, let's say for the business, we it's very important that as machine learning scientists, you do not try to make quick fixes here and there. And when I was working on this, I was like, I can quickly fix this, but that is not future-proof solution. So it's important that you take a step back and think the bigger picture and how can I build a system that is safer in the long run, because there will always be these tests from the outside and trying to find small vulnerabilities here and there. But it's important that you think of how can I make sure that I design a system that in the long run is safer.
Yeah, so it's really moving from being responsive to being proactive.
Yeah.
And making sure you're working on the long term. Well, thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Please check out the other podcasts we have released as well, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you very much.